Two things tonight that I'm both excited and terrified about. So first, I turned in the manuscript for my next book to the publisher. So this is kind of a big deal, at least for me. It's the second book. I was a little reluctant to write it, but I did write it. The book is called, right now, at least. I mean, it can always change. But right now, the book is called. Oh, hang on. Now I'll tell you. American Crusade: How the Supreme Court is Weaponizing Religious Freedom. I kind of love the title, so we'll see if it sticks. As I wrote the book and as I researched and I read and I reread Supreme Court opinions, and I read law review after law review and book after book. It became more and more clear to me that our court is a captured, broken body. And I mean, of course it is. Right? This is a truism, right? The conservatives, the Republicans, did not steal seats to put unbiased, nonpartisan jurists on the most powerful court in the land, right? If they just wanted an unbiased judge, they wouldn't have stolen the seats. They packed the court with ideologues to guarantee outcomes. That is exactly what they did. That is why they did it. So I make that argument conclusively in the religious freedom context in this book. I show how they launched this absolute crusade to redefine that hallowed right and weaponize what was once a protection. Keith, thanks, buddy. Keith is my woodworking friend, though he's actually a woodworker, and I'm, as I've said before on this channel, just a dilettante. Anyway, I'm less of a dilettante when it comes to writing, so I busted my ass on this book, carving out time to write at 5 a.m. basically every day for 14 months. And then the morning after I turned it into the publisher, the court kind of vindicated every word I wrote with oral argument in the Mississippi abortion case that you've been hearing about. So I'm celebrating the manuscript, turning in the manuscript, and I left my drink in the kitchen. Well done there. But I'm mourning for our country. I really am. We are in bad shape right now. There are dark times ahead. There's still a lot of work left to do on the book that I'll be doing as the court is writing the opinion that is essentially going to overturn Roe versus Wade, if not in name, certainly in right. And we don't know exactly what it will look like until we have the opinion, but the right to bodily autonomy, the right to choose, the right to reproductive choice is gone, or will be when they launch this opinion. It's already gone in Texas. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. I'm assuming everybody's got some questions. I know a lot of people are kind of freaking out, and I think that's completely warranted. So the oral argument was about the Mississippi abortion case. Theoretically, it's a 15-week abortion ban, except it's not. The law was designed as a direct challenge to Roe versus Wade, as a direct challenge to the case that solidified, that stated that women that Americans have a right to bodily autonomy, really, and specifically the right to choose to terminate a pregnancy. Now, there's some really interesting stuff that happened at the beginning of this case, because Mississippi. It's all about the court. Mississippi first asked the Supreme Court to take this case in June of 2020. So that was before Justice Kingdom of God was forced onto the court. And the justices were set to decide whether or not to accept this case, which was a bald-faced challenge to Roe versus Wade, when Ruth Bader Ginsburg died. And the court delayed and delayed and rescheduled and delayed until Barrett was put on the court. And then they took the case. And I talk about this a little bit in one of the articles that I linked down below in the description. And then they took the case. And Mississippi, knowing now that they didn't have to win over Roberts anymore, abandoned all pretense and just went for it in the oral argument. Just really went for Roe. So first, let me just do a little throat clearing here about Roberts, because there's a lot of people that are going to try to tell you, and probably even in the wake of this opinion, or at least in the wake of the SB8 opinion, tell you that the court is really split into 3 liberals, 3 conservatives, and then 3 moderates. The 3 moderates possibly being Kavanaugh, Barrett, and Roberts. That's nonsense. The court is 3 liberals and 6 super, hyper, uber conservatives. Roberts is as conservative as everyone else on that court, as Thomas, Alito, Kavanaugh, Barrett, and Gorsuch. The only thing they differ on, is how best to check off every one of the boxes on the conservative wish list. That's it. And Roberts' sole virtue really is that he understands that the only currency the court has is its public legitimacy, that people perceive it as a legitimate institution. Think about that. Really think about that for a long time, and what that means for your activism. He understands that the court has no army, has no way to enforce any of its decisions, right? The only thing it has is people's belief that it is an apolitical, nonpartisan body that is meant and actually is handing out justice. And if they go crazy, as they are, everybody's going to realize that's not the case. And hopefully everybody does. So Roberts wants to check all those same boxes, but he wants to do it much more slowly. He is all for overturning Roe versus Wade. He's right there with all of them. He's just concerned about doing it in a way that preserves the legitimacy of the court. And that makes sense, right? Like, if you can't preserve the change that you make, what's the point of doing it in the first place? That's how he looks at it. So Justice Sotomayor hammered this right at the beginning of oral argument. And just if you go listen to the oral argument, I mean, Justice Sotomayor is just absolutely fantastic. Just absolutely fantastic. And she asked, how will this court survive the stench? How will the court be able to survive? And the answer to that question is that it shouldn't. It should not survive the stench. I mean, the answer to a politicized Supreme Court is to pack the court, is to expand the court. I mean, we've seen this in the past, and it's even the threats of it have worked. So I genuinely hope, and I think this is a big part of what our activism needs to be in the future, is to get people to smell that stench. So I see a question in here about why am I making such strong predictions? I will answer that down below. I'm going to go ahead and paste that in here. It's a good question. I'm going to talk a little bit more first, because another thing that was really, really interesting to me, and again, this is Sotomayor. Sotomayor brought religion into the discussion of Roe versus Wade and abortion, finally. This is something that I think has been just supremely lacking. Everybody's treating it as though it is just this philosophical debate, and it's not. And Sotomayor said that Mississippi's argument was religious at its core, that it was wading into a religious debate on one side, that it was legislating conservative Christianity, though she didn't use those words. What she said was that the whole thing was motivated by religion. She said, how is your interest? She was talking to Mississippi's Attorney General. How is your interest anything but a religious view? The issue of when life begins has been hotly debated by philosophers since the beginning of time. It's still debated in religion. How is this anything other than a religious view? And I just want to point out that was the focus of the Freedom from Religion Foundation's brief to the court. It's what we argued, that the opposition to abortion is strictly religious and that they are legislating religion. That brilliant brief was written by several lawyers at FFRF, mostly by Elizabeth Cavell and by Rebecca Markert, with help from Patrick Elliott. CFI, Center for Inquiry in American Atheists, signed on to the brief. It was really a remarkable moment to see the Supreme Court Justice do that finally. So, other crazy, really, really crazy moments. Barrett, Barrett had like a 2-for-1. She was asking about safe haven laws, which are those laws that allow people to drop off a child at a safe haven, a fire station or a police station, and it's no questions asked. All parental rights are terminated. And the baby's put into the system, or the child's put into the system. And Barrett asks, why don't safe haven laws take care of the problem of unwanted pregnancies? It seems to me that this is Barrett again. It seems to me that focuses on the burden much more narrowly. There is, without question, an infringement on bodily autonomy, which we have in other contexts like vaccines. So there's two crazy things that are happening there. I mean, Barrett is saying, and I've been warning about this for a while too, she's tipping her hand with vaccines. And I know a lot of people want to point out to me that the decisions have already happened, fine. But there has not been a proper religious freedom challenge to vaccine mandates that has reached the court yet. And when that happens, I think we should all be very alarmed. We already saw what they did with other public health orders regarding the pandemic. Public health orders that favored religion and churches, at least in the New York case, and treated them perfectly equally in the California case, and still they were struck down. So that was crazily alarming. And then the adoption was just nonsense, right? I mean, the horror of that decision, giving up a child, compared to deciding to get rid of a few cells that are stuck inside your body, they're not comparable. And then there's also, of course, obviously, the risk of pregnancy, right? It's not just, oh, there's a baby, it's 9 months. People are 75 times more likely to die. The attorneys arguing against the Mississippi law pointed out. They're 75 times more likely to die from having a child in Mississippi than they are from an abortion or have complications. And just leave all that aside. It's a violation of bodily autonomy. The state is forcing birth on a woman in Amy Coney Barrett's narrative. And also, and again, the brilliant attorneys, Center for Reproductive Rights argued the case, and the Solicitor General of the United States, Elizabeth Prologer, who is just unbelievably good. I mean, I'm like just absolutely phenomenal. Good doesn't even begin to cover it. Just absolutely phenomenal oral advocate. Just gave absolute masterclass. There's a really fantastic moment where Justice Roberts did the one thing that you're never supposed to do as a conservative justice, which is talk about international law. And he basically said something like, it's us and China and North Korea that allow this, which is horseshit. And exactly what you want to yell at a judge or anybody when they trot out this horseshit. And she, I can't remember what she did. It's worth going and finding the exchange. She corrected him in just the most politic adept. It's very hard to correct a judge. And she did it just absolutely brilliantly. That was a moment that really stood out to me. But that's like nerd lawyer stuff. But point being, she pointed out, or perhaps it was I'm blanking on the attorney for the Center for Reproductive Rights now, and I hate myself for it, that adoption also existed when Roe was decided. That when Roe versus Wade was decided and when the Casey case was decided. So, I mean, that's not a new thing that Amy Coney Barrett just suddenly, like, this is a new argument that she figured out. And of course, remember that, and I feel like I've been saying this since even before she was nominated, because I was 50-50 it was going to be her. In my day job, I did a lot of vetting of Trump's judges. So I knew a lot about her before this, and I knew they were lining her up for this because we're in on paying attention to every single whisper. Anyway, she was put on the court to ask these kind of questions. She was put on the court to write the opinion that overturns Roe versus Wade. That was the whole purpose of Amy Coney Barrett. This is why she was put into the pipeline from Notre Dame to the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals to the Supreme Court. Anyway, let's see. Let me just scan the. Yep, unfuck the courts. Yes, also do that. Okay, no more questions. I'm going to keep going. Breyer, clearly it's time for him to retire. He is just an old man who loves to hear himself talk, but has nothing valuable to say. It was embarrassing. I would like to see him do that before we are in a midterm fight. The people. There's a lot of talk about the people. Let's just let the people decide about abortion. This is like Mississippi's big rhetorical cloak for their argument. And the people clearly support abortion. I pulled some of the Gallup poll numbers, and American support for abortion in all or most cases was at 80% in May, and it was that's up, but only slightly from the 1970s, when it was at 76%. Okay? Americans support abortion, which is why this Supreme Court gutted the Voting Rights Act a couple of years ago, and why they upheld partisan gerrymandering a couple of years ago. Right? It's no accident. I mean, it is the order that they are doing this in was deliberate. They were robbing people of their political power first to ensure continued minority rule before making this crazy power grab of a decision. And it is a power grab. It's power over women's and really everybody's body. There was a huge stretch where it was just men, all men, just talking about controlling women's bodies. A big chunk before Sotomayor jumped in and wrecked everybody. And a lot of misogyny, too, especially from Alito and especially from Neil Gorsuch. The misogyny coming from Neil Gorsuch is palpable. He just does not like female advocates talking at him, answering his questions. He comes in thinking he's got these great unanswerable questions. And then, Solicitor General Prologer gives this brilliant answer, and he hates it because it's the correct answer. And anyway, it's embarrassing. It is truly embarrassing. Never mind the fact that also Justice Thomas was credibly accused of sexual harassment of basically, across his staff, and that Brett Kavanaugh was credibly accused of sexual assault. And these are the people who are going to be deciding whether or not women have bodily autonomy. And of course, trans men can get pregnant too. So I'm sorry if I'm not using inclusive language all the time. Anyway, the misogyny was just crazy. And then the last big thing that is really, really scary, is the substantive due process stuff. So I'm going to talk about that. I'm going to pull this question that Arthur asked, which is similar to another question. We're going to ask all those together. So substantive due process sounds super nerdy and legal. And it is. All it means is rights that are not explicitly written down in the Constitution. So think of it that way. There are certain rights that we have that are not explicitly named, right? Free speech is explicitly named in the Constitution, but some of our other rights are not. And the founders knew they were going to do that. That's why they wrote the Ninth Amendment. They said that the enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny other rights retained by the people. Okay? That is saying to everybody that you have rights that are not explicitly written down. So we can identify those other rights from the text and the structure of the Constitution and the language of like the 5th and the 14th Amendment, which say that you cannot be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. And liberty is a pretty important word there. So you can't be deprived of liberty without due process. That's where substantive due process comes in. When you hear law nerds and lawyers talking about substantive due process, that's what we mean. And a lot of our rights are situated in that area of law, right? The Constitution doesn't say anything about marriage. Certainly doesn't say anything about interracial marriage. Certainly doesn't say anything about marriage equality more generally. Those rights are at risk. The Obergefell decision, they are coming for the Obergefell decision. Not next, but close to next. And after that, certainly, Loving versus Virginia could fall. How could it not? They would never, ever admit that. They would never even say that. And I think they might even fight it to a certain extent. But logically, there's no real difference. And I've written about both of those. I think both of them are down in the description. Contraception, though, is also going to be on the chopping block. If you think back to the Hobby Lobby case, one of the most ridiculous things about that decision was that a billion-dollar company claimed a religious belief that contraception did not prevent conception, but caused an abortion. And that was not true. Doctors and scientists explained this in a brief to the court. All these professional groups wrote this really clear, concise brief to the court that just said this one particular thing. Those drugs are not abortifacients. They don't cause abortions. And the court didn't care. Hobby Lobby believes that they cause abortions. That's enough for us. So I think depending on how they overturn Roe, depending on the wording, I mean, it is going to have an impact on our other substantive due process rights. There's no way it does not. And certainly the other side is going to argue for that. I think IUDs could be gone within a year of this decision in a lot of places. I think a lot of other forms of birth control could be, especially things like Plan B. Forget about that. This is way worse than many of us understand. And I don't know how to, if you are watching this and you are just floored and you can't believe it and you think I'm, a crazy person, I don't know what to tell you. I mean, I feel like I've been screaming about this for 3 years and nobody's been listening. And I know a lot of other lawyers have really, really people much smarter and well-versed in this, better versed in this than I am. And Rewire News, the women over there are doing phenomenal work. Strict Scrutiny, the women over there are doing phenomenal work. Dahlia Lithwick at Slate, the Center for Reproductive Rights, the ACLU, FFRF, the National Women's Law Center. I mean, the Opening Arguments podcast. I mean, there are so many people that saw this coming and we're talking about it. And we're treated like crazy people. They're coming for all of this. And, I see a lot of people kind of asking similar things in the comments, how is this actually going to play out? How is this going to, politically, I don't know. But I think everybody should be very, very worried. All of the fight to ban abortion is not going to be fully over. Depending on how you're counting, 20, 21, 22 states are going to basically have an immediate ban on abortion when this goes into effect. But that leaves a lot of states, half the states, where they can turn around and focus their energy on. Jesse, I see you asked a question. I'm going to get to that too once I get off my soapbox here. All of their resources can then be pushed into those other fights, into the blue states. I mean, yes, people support abortion overwhelmingly. I don't know that is enough under our system. They've done all they can to ensure minority rule before they're getting to this. Again, gutting the Voting Rights Act, upholding partisan gerrymandering. I mean, this is going to come just before the midterms, so we'll find out pretty quick. But I mean, and again, the Texas SB 8 law, the abortion bounties say that anybody involved in it can be held liable. That's going to allow states to bring other challenges before the Supreme Court. Anyway, I'm going to get to that because I can see people have a lot of questions. So Jesse, I'm going to ask your question first. In 2019, there were 630,000 legal abortions. It has declined due to the lack of available resources already. Are we bringing close to 500,000 unwanted children to the U.S. each year after this, or am I overgeneralizing? I mean, I don't think you're overgeneralizing. There is an important point because this is going to affect Black and brown women and poor women more, who don't have the resources to travel to states that will still allow abortion immediately. It is going to hit them much harder. And some people will still be able to get an abortion for a while. But I mean, this is not to say that, rich white people won't be affected either, right? If you are a woman living in Texas or Mississippi and you have a complication in the middle of the night, you're not going to be able to get on a plane and fly to Washington or Illinois or New York. I mean, and a lot of like there are no, in the Mississippi law, there are no exceptions for the health of the mother or rape or incest. Actually, there are no exceptions for rape or incest. I shouldn't say health of the mother. I don't know. I could have overstated that, and I apologize if I did. But I mean, you can see where they're going with it. You can see where they're going with it. I mean, I think that is the idea. I think that is the idea in the end. So basically, the United States is going to become the Gilead of The Handmaid's Tale. I mean, I've never thought that those were outlandish comparisons. I did discuss this earlier, and feel free to bring it up in the chat. But, one of the premises of The Handmaid's Tale is that environmental degradation has made it so that births are considerably rarer there, right? To Jesse's question, we're not talking about 500,000 unwanted pregnancies a year. It's very, very difficult. And we are going to see the opposite of that here when abortions are banned. We're going to hear horror story after horror story of 12 and 13 and 14-year-olds who are being forced to bring children to term, to have babies at 12 years old because they were raped, because their father raped them. We're gonna read about that, and we're gonna read about that pretty damn soon after this case comes down. So I got a couple variations on this question. So Pete Shepard from Australia asked, why don't you have a national referendum the way other countries do? And I take that to mean, why don't you essentially amend your constitution, vote and protect a woman's right to choose in the Constitution? And Jason McCurry asked something similar. He said, why can't Congress just pass a law that makes abortion legal in all 50 states? And we could do that. Congress could do that. And I expect that's something that might happen and that people might want to do after this. And that would be okay. It would certainly be a Band-Aid, maybe. But it's not a fix. So first of all, to the constitutional amendment, our Constitution is about the hardest in the world to amend. The United States Constitution is. It's very, very difficult. So let's assume we don't have the ability to do that right now. I mean, we couldn't even pass the Equal Rights Amendment, but maybe we can tack that on to this theoretical amendment. So let's just talk about Congress doing something. Can they? Should they? Yes, absolutely. They should. But the court was stolen. The Supreme Court was packed. These justices were chosen to guarantee an outcome that is illegal, that robs Americans of their bodily autonomy. Right? The Republican Party stole the court to steal your rights. And everything we do to fix this is going to end up back before that stolen, packed, broken court. Everything. So everything comes back to court expansion and reform. And this kind of ties in with another question that was asked, why now are you making such strong predictions? I've read the background, and I did this both for the new book, and I did this in my day job. I've read the background of every single one of these conservative judges. I know where they went to school. Almost all of them Catholic school. I know where they went to church. I know what they wrote about when the law conflicts with their religious beliefs, what they ought to do. And I know what they're doing now. I know that Amy Coney Barrett went and taught classes for the Crusaders, the Alliance Defending Freedom. I know that Leonard Leo, who is a very zealous Catholic, and I talk about him quite a bit in the new book, orchestrated a lot of these placements and policed these nominees for ideological purity, so that they wouldn't have another David Souter who they put on the court only to find out that he supports state-church separation. They weren't going to make that mistake again, and they didn't. So I'm Legislative fixes. Can we tie them up in court? Can we end the filibuster now so we can get things done with the law? Can we stop it? Do all of that. But it doesn't matter until we fix the problem with the Supreme Court. You know, Ian Millhiser, who's a journalist at Vox now, he covers the Supreme Court for Vox. He was at Think Progress previously. He said it's wild that a third of the Supreme Court was appointed by a man who attempted to overthrow the United States government, and we just continue to let those judges hand down decisions. Such a great way of putting it. That is where this is not a legitimate court. And until we grapple with that, and until people get that into their heads and we fix that problem, we're going to continue to have to fight problem after problem after problem. Evan said, I appreciate your content and look forward to reading the new epilogue in the founding myth. Evan, thank you. I really appreciate that. For those of you who don't know, Evan is not a plant, by the way. The founding myth is coming out in paperback. Some of you were fortunate enough to grab a copy, but it has a brand new epilogue in the final pages that's all about January 6th. Begins with that quote by Voltaire, "Those who can make you believe absurdities can make you commit atrocities," which is a popular translation of, obviously, his French version. A lot of new information in there. If you haven't gotten it, it really, I think, ties the book together. You can pre-order it right now. It comes out on Tuesday. It'll ship. If you pre-order it right now, you probably will get it before then. I heard from a couple of people that Amazon had shipped some of their pre-orders, or they got notices that it had been shipped. So if you're interested in reading that, please go do it. I'm not sure in terms of digital or audio copies when those are going to come out. But also go leave a review if you've got it. Would love that. Okay, so I am more than happy to answer more questions if you've got them in the comments. Yes, for people, I see there's a conversation about the new book. New book is called American Crusade, How the Supreme Court is Weaponizing Religious Freedom. I go into how the court was packed quite a bit, and I talk about how they are on a crusade to weaponize religious freedom, and I really try to lie that out. If you have questions about what happened and what is going to happen, I'm happy to take them. Go ahead and throw them in the chat right now. It looks like my moderators are doing their thing, which I really, really appreciate. Oh, see, yeah, people already received some of the books. So Marissa, oh wait, some people got it at the convention. Okay, I see. So Marissa did ask a question. Doesn't it depend on how the decision is written? I heard if the decision is written a certain way, it would make it very difficult for Congress to write a law that wouldn't be overturned. Yes, this is my point, Marissa. I think Congress can probably do something no matter what, but I also don't think that matters. If we could get a constitutional amendment together quickly enough, we might possibly be able to do that. But given the way that the election went, I don't see how that's at all possible. And again, the decision to overturn Roe versus Wade will be a completely lawless decision. It'll be untethered from anything that we understand should happen in the legal profession at our courts under our law. And if they're willing to do that to rob Americans of their bodily autonomy, of course they're going to do it again. Once you do it once, what's the point? You saw this actually in the COVID cases is a great example. They overturned hundreds of years of precedent in these COVID cases on the shadow docket in paragraphs, just paragraphs, like not even barely pages. And then they pointed to, see, then they have another case that comes down and then they just point to it and say, see, we already told you guys this. No. You can't do this anymore. Religious freedom. A much better job detailing this in the new book. But whatever Congress does, all roads lead back to the Supreme Court. 1 First Street, Northeast, right? All roads are going to lead back to that eventually. And they will knock it down again. Keith said, "Can you please go grab your drink? We'll be fine for a minute." Keith, I got my short running shorts on, so I cannot go grab my drink. It would be embarrassing. I didn't. Anyway. Okay. I'm still happy to chat. I will allow people to, yeah, if you've got questions. Angela, this does not have to be the end. I do want to answer more questions if people have them. I know a lot of people are scared. I know that I've probably been a little scary in this. I almost said too scary, but that's not right. Whatever your thoughts are on what I am saying right now, I'm not overstating this even a little bit. If anything, I'm not a woman. I'm never going to carry a pregnancy to term. I have no idea what that is like. I honestly can't imagine it. And I've thought about it. I genuinely think it's very difficult for men to even begin to imagine that. It's very abstract for us until that baby is out. Something that the men on the Supreme Court just seemed totally willing to be completely arrogant about, just up there chit-chatting away in the most ridiculous fashion about women and forcing them to have pregnancy. I mean, we're talking about forced birth here, right? I mean, anyway, where should we direct our political efforts is a fantastic question. And again, for me, everything comes back to court expansion and reform. Biden has a Supreme Court commission formed right now that was always meant to delay the few of us who have been agitating for court expansion and reform since before the election, saying that we have to do this now, otherwise we're going to get a decision exactly fucking like this, which we are. That I do not expect much to change, at least not from the work of the commission in light of this oral argument, because the decision is not going to be done. The commission's work is going to be done in December. And I think all of our efforts have to be directed at convincing politicians that court reform and expansion is needed. Biden has to pack the courts. Congress has to expand the courts. And the courts are already packed, so I hate to use that. The courts they've already been packed. There is no other solution to this. And that means, yes, electing Democrats, voting them in. It means not voting third party, people. Not trying to send a message. Yeah, I know you don't like everything they're doing. Neither do I. But this is what we get. This is what we get. The other side is as united as it is possible to be. And they don't need to do much. They only need to chip away at the edges because this Supreme Court has gutted the Voting Rights Act, because this Supreme Court has allowed partisan gerrymandering, because all of our maps are gerrymandered. So everything comes back to, in my mind, expanding the federal judiciary from top to bottom. I'm worried that we don't have the time or political will to do that. Certainly not before the midterms, and we might not have the opportunity to do it after the midterms, which means volunteering to get Democrats into office so that we can do it. Yes, Joe Manchin sucks. Still have to get it done. Still have to get more of them in office and fewer Republicans in office. That is the only way to do this. So that's it. Yeah, I mean, none of the comments are incorrect right now. So I know it's not true. Is it true that the midterms usually go to the other party? Yeah, the midterms are usually not good for the party that won the presidency. The other side is usually far more, the electorate of the voters on the other side are usually far more motivated. Possibly this decision, if this decision follows the typical trajectory of controversial Supreme Court decisions, it'll come down sometime in June. I'm not sure that it's going to, because of the midterms. I mean, I think there's a chance that, well, I'm not going to hypothesize on the exact timing, but typically I'll say it would be June. I think there's a good chance it could be significantly earlier because they want to get away from the midterms. I think there's also a chance that they'll do. There's a couple different things they could do. Actually, I would really recommend everybody go read Dahlia Lithwick over at Slate. I can't remember the exact title of her most recent piece on these oral arguments, but it talks about how the court is gaslighting us from beginning to end. And if you're seeing this not live, I'll put a link in the notes below. And her point is that the court might not overturn Roe versus Wade all the way, and that they might leave it standing for political reasons, but also to avoid some of the blowback. And that in the Texas SB 8 case, they're probably going to say, yeah, of course, you can sue the state of Texas over this law, which is what they should have done based on the law a long time ago. And that decision, paired with this decision, will let some people who have defended putting Kavanaugh and Barrett and Gorsuch on the court claim, see, look, this is a moderate court. Everybody, you're just hysterical, crazy women. She's more eloquent than I am on it. I would go read it. It was probably the best piece I read about the oral arguments. So, okay, friends, I don't see any more questions, and that was 45 minutes. Jeez, that was a lot of ranting, Andrew. Well, thank you for joining me for my rant. Yes, the filibuster has to go. The Electoral College has to go. Gerrymandering has to go. Got to put Dems in to do any of that stuff. I mean, if the Republicans win, the first thing they're going to do is get rid of the gerrymander. Yeah. And yes, I know my channel got super political there, but I mean, this is the reality that we face. And this is my personal channel. And you didn't hear me doing any of this before we were in this situation. So that's the reality. Anyway, I appreciate all your support. I appreciate the kind words. I will let you know more about the new book when I have more, when I can share a cover, when you can do a pre-order. In the meantime, I'm allergic. In the meantime, go pick up a copy of The Founding Myth. Check out the epilogue. You could just go into a bookstore and read the epilogue if you want. I wouldn't be opposed, or to your library. Though I'd certainly appreciate you leaving a positive review on Amazon or sharing it with your friends. It does, I have to say, it does make a fantastic gift for the conservatives in your life. You know, if I'm lucky, maybe one of them won't burn it again. Sold a lot of books that way. Anyway, I appreciate it, everybody. Have yourself a lovely evening. Good night.